While most OKC fans might not have been surprised that the Thunder were able to beat the Spurs in 6 games, I know I was certainly caught off guard, certainly after the Spurs Game 1 blowout where it looked like the Thunder would get laughed off the stage. But something peculiar happened. OKC coach Billy Donovan made some adjustments, and Spurs coach Gregg Popovich did not. While we've all criticized the Thunder offense for being way too isolation heavy, turns out the Spurs offense ended up looking like the bad version of OKC's offense under Scott Brooks, resorting to stagnant isolations for Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge way too often, allowing OKC's defense to pressure them into extremely difficult shots. But there was a peculiar pattern to the Spurs offense. When the starters were out there, time and again, you'd see the hint of some of their beautiful game, a flex cut, maybe a dribble handoff, but it would quickly revert to 4 guys standing around while either Kawhi or LaMarcus would go to work trying to get free, resulting in very difficult shots that didn't go in as often as they did in the regular season. The Spurs offense ranked 3rd in the regular season with an offensive rating of 108.1, but it sunk 4 points lower against OKC, and the big reason is because the starters struggled to run their offense effectively. The first five's offensive rating was even lower at 103.3, and when you go up against the Thunder's attack, you're going to have to score some points to win some games. That said, the weird thing was that when the bench players entered the game, the ball suddenly found energy, whizzing around the perimeter, forcing the defense to scramble to keep up with an object that so clearly moves faster through the air than it does on the bounce. Even if these didn't all result in scores, the mental damage these types of possessions inflict on a defense is immense, causing a feeling of futility as the more energy the defense expends, the worse it gets until the Spurs find a good, wide-open rhythm jump shot or layup. Of course, when either Kawhi or LaMarcus went to the bench, it's natural that the less talented players needed to rely on ball movement more, but it was still no excuse for allowing the starters to put themselves in such difficult positions. Likewise, taking so many difficult shots also takes its toll, and it got to the point where I was wondering how the heck is San Antonio going to score at all? The next thing that came as a big surprise was how Billy Donovan outcoached Gregg Popovich. Yeah, I said it. Donovan made an adjustment to his lineup that Popovich could not counter. While it's unclear where the Thunder got the idea to play Enes Kanter and Steven Adams together, since they barely used it in the regular season, it proved to be a huge difference. And the biggest area it helped them with was in offensive rebounding. In the regular season, the Thunder's offensive rebounding rate was 31.1%, meaning they grabbed 31.1% of their misses. And in this series, the offensive rebounding rate dropped to 28% overall. However, when Donovan would turn to the lineup of Steven Adams, Kevin Durant, Enes Kanter, Dion Waiters, and Russell Westbrook, that offensive rebounding rate skyrocketed to 57.1%. To put this into context, check out how many extra possessions and points these two generated for the Thunder. OKC starters had a net negative rating, so one of the only ways they were going to compete was to create as many extra possessions as possible, and the Spurs had no way to combat all that extra length. When the middle 4 games were decided by such small margins, just 1 or 2 extra possessions proves monumental. Of course, there was one way Gregg Popovich could have combated this: exploit Enes Kanter while he's on the defensive end of the floor. While Kanter may be decent in the post one-on-one, he certainly is a liability when involved in the pick and roll. Out of the 25 possessions where he was guarding the ball screener, the Spurs scored 24 points for a healthy .96 points per possession. In the regular season, the Spurs ranked 5th in the league at .859, and a .96 points per possession would have put them a hair behind league-leading Golden State. In the playoffs, the Spurs overall were .905 in the pick and roll with a ball handler, so you'd think this was an area they'd want to exploit again and again. That said, of the 45 possessions they ran pick and roll with Kanter on the floor, they got him involved in a pick and roll 25 times. So it wasn't like they didn't try to exploit him, but it seems like they didn't recognize the urgency of getting him out of the game. Had they done it more, Donovan would have been forced to sit him and lose his advantage. However, the other half of this equation was Steven Adams, who truly came into his own in this series as their anchor in the middle. Not only did he average a double-double in the series, his impact on the court across the team was more profound than any other player. If you look at the main players of the Thunder's lineups and their on-off numbers, Adams has the biggest disparity between the net rating when he's off and when he's on. Combining his hard-nosed defense, good hands, and tough screens, it's no wonder the Thunder were able to pull this series out. These are some major factors for how the Oklahoma City Thunder outlasted the San Antonio Spurs in 6 games. You could also point to some problematic matchup decisions by Popovich, like putting Tony Parker on Russell Westbrook for long stretches in games 3 and 4 instead of going with Kawhi Leonard, which worked very well early. And we certainly can't overlook the worst officiated 13.5 seconds of all time, as well as a couple of terrible calls down the stretch of Game 5 that clearly made it much easier for the Thunder to win those games. But those things happen, and it's the adjustments that you can control that make the real difference. And in this case, going to a little-used lineup gave Billy Donovan an edge he never relinquished, and could have quite possibly ended the careers of Manu Ginobili and Tim Duncan.